Welcome to Country Fried Rock, where we talk with musicians to find out what inspires their creativity. Country Fried Rock, music uncovered. My guest this morning on Country Fried Rock is Lincoln Durham, a record that I got in the mail and was waiting for and haven't taken it out of the CD player in my car yet. Good morning, Lincoln. Thanks for being with us on Country Fried Rock.
Well, thank you guys for having me.
We're glad to. How'd you get into music originally?
Well, originally my dad got me into playing the fiddle when I was 4 years old. Yeah, I started playing the fiddle, little tiny toy-looking fiddle. It was my dad and my grandpa, actually, and it just kind of started from there and snowballed for 20 years or so.
So were you playing like Suzuki method, or was this family taught?
It's funny that you know that. It was actually the Suzuki method. Yeah, in fact, I even forget that that's what it was, but that is. It was this little... I can't read music, unfortunately. The Suzuki method, for those that don't know, is basically it'll say like an A over a 1. What it is it means you play the A string with your first finger, and that's how I learned how to play.
But you stuck with it.
I did. I was the type where I'd stuck with the fiddle for a long time, but I never really latched onto it. I did play it for, goodness, probably 15 years or so. It was one of those things where I was 4 years old. It was kind of selected for me. And so I never really, it wasn't until later in life, almost recently, that I actually really embraced it. It's the same thing, with kids that are put on piano when they're young, and then once they get 30 years old, they really wish they would have kept playing the piano, and it's kind of the way I am with the fiddle. I wish I would have taken it more serious now, because I've brought it back into the live sets, and it's a lot of fun, but I would be a lot better if I had kept it up. But it was just kind of the thing where it was chosen for me. So, but I did do that for a while, but that kind of gatewayed me into the next musical segments of my life.
What was the first thing that you chose to do?
Well, a lot of people, in fact, I used to forget and think, I went from that to guitar. But actually I didn't. I started wanting to sing first. So when I was playing the fiddle, we had this little Opry band. And what it was every third Saturday, I think, of the month, there was this little place called Osceola Opry, and it was in a town called Osceola. And it was this old, like a schoolhouse from, like the turn of the century, out in the middle of nowhere, this old schoolhouse. And every third Saturday we would play for all the kind of country people who would come out and listen, and it was usually a packed house, just folded chairs and things like that. And so that's what I played the fiddle at for a while, for 10 years or so, when I was probably 8 to about 15. And it was in that period that over time I was really a shy kid and just kind of sat over there and played the fiddle, didn't even look at the audience, kind of stood sideways. And it was during that time that I started, as I got to be more of a teenager, I started wanting to sing. And so that was the first thing I did, was I started singing. So I would play the fiddle, and we were doing a lot of, I was playing a lot of Bob Wills, and we did a lot of Hank Williams Sr. And things like that. So I would still do all that, but then when it came my time to sing, I would just, kind of put the fiddle under my shoulder and sing a song. And that's where the next chapter, I guess, kind of started.
Ah. So in this Osceola Opry, were you choosing to sing some original stuff? When did that come around?
Oh, no, that didn't come around until... I would say that didn't come around until I was probably 18 or 20. I did a lot of, back then it was just covers. That's all we did. I don't think anybody in the band, all the other guys were grown, and I was, like I said, I started when I was 8 there, and they're all, 50-year-old men,
Right.
And they were doing classic country covers. I don't think any of them ever had an aspiration to write a song. Maybe they did, but I don't recall doing any originals. And then when I first started singing, I was into the real standard kind of country thing back then, and so that's the kind of stuff I did. It was around 18 that I started. I guess maybe I wrote my first song, which was pretty terrible if I remember.
What was leading to you to want to actually write your own song, though?
Well, I got into, from those stages from singing, I picked up the guitar, really got obsessed with the guitar, and that's kind of what led me on the track, I guess, that I am now. And I was listening to a lot of, the 60s rock. I was listening to a lot of Zeppelin and a lot of Hendrix, and then a lot of Bob Dylan. And I think listening to a lot of Bob Dylan and a lot of Jimi Hendrix got me into, even though, Dylan you definitely think of, as a songwriter. Hendrix, not so much. I don't think people usually classify him as someone who writes songs. But those were the two that kind of inspired me to start writing. And so that's when I started to write. And the first songs, were very kind of inspired by that. So they were kind of 60s feeling, kind of psychedelic sounding, and those were the first tunes that I wrote that, like I said, were not very good, I don't think. But that was the first delving I had into songwriting. And I kind of didn't really take it seriously for a long while. I'd write one song a year probably. And then just all of a sudden, after other influences, I just started, writing every day.
Because you wanted to or because you had to?
Because I had to. Yeah, it was a thing where, just things in life and tend to kind of dictate other things. And I started writing kind of as an outlet for feelings and for emotions and things like that. And once I started doing that, I couldn't stop.
And so when you were writing these, were you performing in them or were you simply for yourself?
I wasn't performing yet. I went through this little phase of kind of a cocooning kind of thing where for about a year I lived by myself, and I look back at that and those days, and that was where I think really became, my own, became what I was going to be. And, I would rarely see anybody, I have a tendency, I'm married now, but I could be a recluse very easily. I was a recluse then. I would literally go maybe 2 weeks I would talk to the person, making my food or something, and that was about it. And I just did a lot of writing, and the intent was to perform it eventually. It wasn't really just to write, just to get it out, that was a portion of it too, but it was also with the intent of, I just kind of woodshedded for like a year, and just really practiced my guitar, wrote a lot of songs, tried to come back out a lot more fierce and a lot, I guess, different from what I was doing.
So it was an intentional focus on finding where you wanted to be.
It was definitely, just kind of revamping, resetting, my whole outlook on everything. And that really is what set me on the course that I'm on now. I attribute that little cocooning process. I don't think I would be at all, or to be doing at all what I'm doing now if it hadn't been for that. So I'm very grateful for that little time.
What helped you in that process?
I think just the solitude, being alone with my own thoughts for the first time in 20 some odd years was, I think, the perfect thing, because I was the person who went through life, pacifying my mind with TV and with, just noise of any kind. If I was sitting at the house doing something, no matter what it was, I would have a TV going, noise, anything, never read. And now, I read an insane amount. I'm reading constantly. I don't own a TV, anything like that, and it was mostly because of that. Going through the year of solitude, like literally there was no noise. In the house, there was no TV, and I would read books, I would write, and that's still what I do now. Not quite so much as when I was alone, but that's what I do now. And so I think it was the solitude of the whole thing, and just being forced to be, faced with whatever demons I had, is what kind of made the turn for me.
What do you like to read?
I love classics, so I usually always revert to that. My writing style is very kind of dark and all that stuff. So I read a lot of, Poe, so I'm always going back to that. I've got a giant book of Poe that I revert back to like once a year, and I just start reading, and I've never made it through it all because it's the size of 3 Bibles, it seems. But that's what I'm reading now, is that stuff. And read a lot of, H.G. Wells. I like that. I was a big Lord of the Rings guy. Newer stuff is, I like Cormac McCarthy a lot.
Right.
Because, he's a newer guy, but he's got my style of writing, just kind of dark, decrepit, morbid characters. But I'm the type, though, I kind of revel in dark and depression. So it's kind of technically, with me, it is me being happy. I just find my happiness in the dark stuff as opposed to sunshine.
Well, and they say, like, for people who are obsessed with horror films, for example, it gives you an outlet for those feelings. Right.
Yeah. It's just I don't know. I just when I'm reading, these I've always been just a depressive person, but it's almost like sometimes there's like the real depression, and I've been through that, and that's not fun. But then there's also when you're I don't know, you're watching some, depressing movie or something, it's like, I realize, wow, it's depressing, but I like it. That's why I'm watching it. That's why I'm reading this, is I'm giddy in the when you walk outside and it's rainy, overcast and gray, my wife can't stand those days, and I come alive when it's that London kind of a, day.
So you spent this woodshedding time writing and figuring out where you were. What did you do with these songs once you were there?
Even after I did the woodshedding, I still don't think I was quite there yet. And what I did is I started performing them live. I started, going out to the little kind of coffee shops and things, and playing the songs. And it was still more kind of singer-songwriter. Like, I mean, the songs were still there. The songs were, basically what they are now, but they were still, what it's become now is this kind of very, it's been termed real, like, kind of hard-edged, and it's, the live show is very eccentric, and it's gotten loud, not loud in a bad way, like a loud as in, this hurts my ears, but a loud and kind of just, it's a solo thing, but it's this big, giant, full sound, you big boom, kind of a kick drum, and so it's, a lot of people say Jack White, Black Keys kind of a thing, and it was only until really recently, I think, that it became that. When I came out with it, after that woodshedding, it was, almost kind of like a sit-down acoustic guitar kind of a thing. It still had that edge to it, but I was very much more tame. And as I got going, the intent was always to get a band. And as I kept woodshedding, though, because I started playing the songs live, not at the end of the year, but, during the course of it. So I was still living alone, still, being the recluse, but I would go out and play these songs. But then what I would do is I kept adding, elements to it, the harmonica or the and the porch board and all this. And so eventually I got really influenced. I was always a fan of, but really got obsessed about a couple years ago with Tom Waits. It was really in kind of getting obsessed with that. And really, everybody was talking about the Black Keys and Jack White. I was always a White Stripes fan. Didn't really know who the Black Keys were at the time. Even when they were big, I didn't know who they were. But anyway, I started engrossing myself in that. Started getting that kind of more, flamboyancy going with the show, to the point where then it and especially with Tom Waits, and then it kind of became, I guess, what it is now, where it's a lot more. I guess it's more entertaining to watch than just sitting on a bar stool playing a guitar. Hey, this is Lincoln Durham on Country Fried Rock.
You've had some collaborators along the way. What led to wanting to bring other people into what you were doing?
Doing the record is where, I got Ray Wiley Hubbard produced the record, and as long with co-produced it with George Reef. I had a relationship with them prior to it, so I always knew. In fact, Ray has always been, he's kind of been my musical guidance. He took me under his wing, and he's the one that taught me kind of how to finger pick the guitar, and he's the one that influenced me in learning to be able to carry the whole song by yourself and then adding the people as it goes.
Right.
And that's kind of what accidentally became this kind of one-man show thing that I'm doing, is because I did that, to the point where it got to where, there was starting to be a buzz about, this guy's all this noise, by himself. So in doing I knew I wanted George and Ray involved in the record. George Reef, a lot of people, don't know him like Ray, but George is a bass player, and he produced the latest Band of Heathens record, and has been a bass player, of course, for Ray for years, or he did Jacob Dylan. And then Chris Robinson had a band called the New Earth Mud, and he was the bass player for that. And right now he's playing with the Courtyard Hounds. So he's got a lot of, which is the Dixie Chick Sisters. And so he's got a lot of skins on the wall, and his ideas are just, I could not do a record without George. And so I really wanted them to be a part of the record, the two of them. And from there, and then Rick Richards, the drummer, he's Ray's drummer. He's the drummer on almost every cool record you've ever heard. And Rick is the, he's the drummer of all drummers. And between those three, that was the core of the people that I wanted to use. And then from there, through George's influence and Ray's influence, we got, as we would need, like a little shininess to a song or something, we would call in, like Jeff Plankenhorn did the mandolin. And we had Bucka Allen do some accordion and piano, and Iggy Vaughn some background vocals and stuff like that. So it was a fun collaboration. I still just do the solo thing, live, but it was fun, getting to play with some real musicians. That was very cool.
You'd been working on these songs quite a bit on your own during this period of solitude, and then started playing them out in sort of a singer-songwriter setting. And then you knew you were going to move towards recording them. What was that process between the gigging a little bit with them and knowing you needed to have them recorded?
Well, that's an interesting story, actually. That the album took probably about 2 years to make. And what would happen is that I knew Ray from before I started this woodshedding process and all that. He believed, in what I was doing from an early start. So as I got these new songs, we decided to record them. And what we would do is we went in, we recorded maybe 2 or 3 songs, and I funded the whole thing on my own just by saving money. So what we would do is we would kind of run out of money and we'd pause. And this was still, during this woodshedding thing. And so we would come back 2 or 3 or 4 months later, and the sound and the show had changed drastically. So then what we would do is they would say, oh, well, that's much cooler. Let's record that. But it's the same songs, but let's record it that way. So then we would do it, and then run out of money, and then 3 or 4 months later come back, and it had changed even again. And we re-recorded the same probably 2 or 3 songs, maybe 3 or 4 times before it finally, finally we came into a bulk of money to just be able to go in like a regular person would and go in for a week and record. And that was just recently. We started, like I said, probably 2 years ago of starting and restarting, and then we finally went in, I guess maybe about a year, because the album's out now. It just came out January 31st. So probably about a year ago, we finally went in and we're like, we've got a decent bulk of money now. Let's just go in for a week and re-record everything again. And that's what we did, and that's what we came up with. But, it's still evolving, for me. Like I love the record, and I hope people dig it and buy it and all that good stuff. But I'm already, like, oh yeah, but wait till you hear this. So it is just an ever evolving thing. I think if you quit evolving, if you quit changing, then you might be ready to stop.
So the record is out, but your live performance is changing with some of the songs. What's leading you in new or different directions with them?
Just kind of honing the craft, realizing that writing the song or writing what you consider good lyrics is still not the end of it. I think doing the solo thing, it helps me to try to make sure that the song is always interesting. And so it's things like switching up the choruses and the verses, or doing the chorus this way and the verse that way, so that, you try at least every song, every 30 seconds is something new and interesting. And it's that thing where, so many people don't put a lot of emphasis on their words or on the but then those that maybe do have these amazing words, and that's, I was getting to the point where I was focusing so much on the words and what I was saying that is the song, step back, and is the song actually interesting to hear?
Right.
Maybe interesting verbally, but is it interesting, melodically? It was a lot of that. It was a lot of just getting more acquainted with making the song consistently interesting. And then, then you'd run into the same problem, which I think a lot of musicians probably do. I definitely have the problem of, coming up with songs that sound almost identical to another song that you've written earlier. You kind of get into ruts or get into, and just learning to get out of that, whether it's grab another guitar or change the tuning, things like that. And then, like I said, too, just I would watch a lot of YouTube videos of Tom Waits and Jack White and all these things, and just figuring out cool visual, entertaining things to see, and incorporating that. I did a show with a guy named Matt King from Nashville, and I think Matt's a really great musician and songwriter. Yeah, to check him out sometime.
I will.
Great, but he had this mic. Yeah, I later found out that the Black Keys use it, but it's like this kind of AM radio sounding tin can mic.
Ooh, like a ribbon mic, sort of.
Yeah, and it. I love. He had it, and I inquired about it and ended up getting me one. And it was things like that. chanting phrases or preaching sound and stuff, on this microphone in between, or, in the middle of songs. And, just things like that is where my mind started to go, to try to just make everything unique. My biggest thing was always to try to, because I had a lot of songs that there's some songs that I really love, but there's some songs that I would play because I needed more time and I hated, And so what I tried to do is from then on, my whole set, I wanted, if some big shot or whatever, whoever you'd want to see or hear the music, if they walked in at any point during the set, I would have been happy with the song that they heard, and think that was without it sounding like the other songs, And so that's basically what I try to do, is just every song was unique and weird and representative of me enough to where if you just heard one song, any song out of the set, then I would be, happy with you hearing that one song. And so that's the kind of stuff that kind of caused me kept me growing, I guess.
Now that it's out and you're continuing to evolve, do you watch your own YouTube videos when people take stuff?
I don't. I love the record, but I don't like listening to myself. And so I don't like listening to the record, and I don't like listening or watching the YouTube videos. I will watch for, 30 seconds of it, just to see if somebody else posted it, or if I thought a song was, if I played a show that I thought was terrible and then I see that there's video of it, I'll watch it just to see what nightmare I thought was on stage, if it was actually out out in the audience. So just to see, okay, how realistic was this terrible show that I went through. But other than that, no, I don't watch myself too much. I just can't stand myself very much, so I don't watch too much.
I'm finding interesting things with some people who kind of obsessively watch fan videos of themselves and then tweak it based on that, and others who are like, I've never listened to any of my own records once they're done.
Yeah, I listened to the record, when I first got it, for a few times, and it's in the iTunes, because of importing it and making sure everything worked and all that good stuff. And if it pops up on the iPod, I can't change it quick enough, But I can understand those, like on a YouTube video, on a live performance. I can understand those that watch it to tweak. If I could manage to listen to a full show, then that would actually be probably really beneficial to do, but I just can't do it. Hey, this is Lincoln Durham. Check out my new record, The Shovel versus the Howling Bones, at lincolndurham.com.
So now that you've taken these on the road after the release, how is that impacting where you're headed now?
I think I'm embracing I hate calling it like a one-man band kind of a thing, but as I go out and I play these songs, I realize it's very representative of what's on the record, but at the same time, it's still, for the most part, it's me and drums. Rick Richards on the record. It's mostly me and him and then we added the mandolin here and there, or the piano and stuff like that. I think on the next one, or maybe the next recordings, I still want it to be big and rocked up sounding, but I want it to be even more so representative of what I'm doing on stage. Still using other people, but sounding less like a rock band and more, again, kind of that Tom Waits influence, more kind of junkyard,
Yes.
The beats maybe aren't even made with drums. They're made with pots and pans or something, what I mean? Just something more primal, I guess, on the next one, than as structured as what this one is.
I was reading recently, maybe other people know this, but I sure didn't. Those very first Buddy Holly and the Crickets recordings, the drums were cardboard boxes.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
We actually used a cardboard box several times on the record.
It gives that kind of thunk.
Yeah, you would be amazed at, those drum kits are thousands of dollars for a good one, and you'd be amazed at how great a refrigerator box sounds. Or even a briefcase. Rick played a bird feeder on some of the songs. Yeah, turned a bird feeder upside down.
Cool.
And it's just, that's the kind of stuff I want to experiment more with on the next record. And just, like I said, it still have that intensity, just as much as this one, but not so full band expecting.
Who would you love to work with for that?
Oh, I would do the same people. Definitely Rick, for the percussion part.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't fathom anybody having that same groove that Rick can get, and then, like I said, George is just an absolute genius, in what he does, and Ray too, between the two of them, it's just, I wouldn't want to work with anybody else. So I would love to work with those guys again. And I mean it, I've thought about that before, because people like, for instance, the Heathens, they use a different producer each record. I think
Right.
that's really cool to do because it gives you such a variety. It keeps things fresh. But at the same time, I've thought about that, and I thought, man, I can't. I just would not want to venture away from what I love. Definitely the three,
Right.
Rick, Ray, and George.
It sounds like you're saying that not only do they speak your language for what you want to get, but they also kind of get you.
Yeah, they do. And so that's a tough thing, to find the right marriage of someone that you don't have to explain anything. You don't have to let them listen to other records, to try to kind of get their head wrapped around it. They're the type of people, they're not a lot like a really good producer. You might let them hear certain albums and they'll kind of get, okay, I know but these guys actually are that vibe.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't have to understand your vibe. They just are that vibe. So all they got to do is be themselves. And they produce other people where they have to get their head wrapped around a different type of vibe. But they are the vibe that I am.
You're headed down the same road.
Yeah, and in a lot of respects, they come up with stuff that I wouldn't have thought about either. So it's almost like, in some avenues of it, they're almost more in tune with what I'm trying to do than I am. Like they'll come up with ideas where, like for me, I don't have experience with drumming. I'm not a drummer.
Right.
I've never been one, so I know nothing about drum. And George, would kind of sit with Rick, and they'd come up with this really weird, cool stuff that you would never think would work for that particular song.
Mm-hmm.
And it's perfect. It's those situations where, they know better what I'm looking for than I do when it comes to that, because I would not know what to tell a drummer.
That's cool.
At all. Because not only do I know how to play drums or understand drums, I don't even play with drums. No clue as to what to tell you, and they'll come up with just the coolest little off-kilter weird stuff that I would have never been able to think of. It's that kind of comfort in that if I don't know the answer to something, they're going to figure out the answer to it.
So are you still writing?
I am still writing. In fact, I went through a spell, actually. You kind of, it's that old thing of, sometimes the river flows real hard. Sometimes it's dammed up really good, and I went through a phase where I think kind of trying to we still do all our in-house stuff. So, we released the record independently and so on. So we're just engulfed in the business portion of the music, thing for the last few months. I think that really kind of put a damper on the whole creative avenue of it for a while. But about, 3 or 4 weeks ago, it started to, the river started to flow again. So I'm back to writing. I'm not the kind of guy that can just sit or say, okay, I'm going to write today. I just kind of go about my life and then inspirational hit, and then I'll start writing for a few weeks, and then I've learned to just kind of go along with it and not try to force it if it's not there, and definitely not fight it when it is there, just go with it. And so it came back, and I've been writing. I've probably got another album and a half ready to go. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to it. I don't know when we'd actually ever, we just released this one. So, yeah, I'm still writing, and, that's a part of why I read so much, and that's part of why I reverted back to the Poe book, as I just wanted some more dark, depraved inspiration. So, that's books are always what gets my creative juices flowing.
I get the continuation of the dark and depraved, but what direction do you think you're heading lyrically?
The same. I've always been. I realized a while back. Even Ray's got some really dark lyrics and stuff, but he also has these funny songs. Hayes
Right.
Carl is known for really funny songs that a lot of people really like, or love songs. People have all these love songs, and for a while I really kind of battled with, man, I don't have variety. I don't have, all mine are just death and destruction and impending doom. And so I was trying to, I want to write a lighthearted song, or I want to write a love song. And I realized I just flat out can't do it. Because I don't write, I don't know, systematically, I guess. I don't write, a lot of those guys, that write for a living, they okay, I'm going to write a love song or whatever. And so that's what they do. But I write only when I'm moved to, for whatever reason. So it's I don't know if my songs are good or not, but they're at least heartfelt, because I write when I'm really experiencing a strong emotion. But I've realized that I've kind of only experienced the doom and gloom emotion.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of fighting it, I decided, well, I guess that's just what I am. If you're coming to if you're listening to me fall in love or to slow dance, you're in the wrong spot. So I just decided to, just kind of go with the whole. James McMurtry is known for his, kind of social commentary songs, and maybe I'll be known for my depressing impending doom song.
Right. It's funny that you say that. I just talked with James this week, and I was engaging him on that topic of songs of social commentary, and he's like, I don't mean to do it.
Yeah, that's the thing, is you don't. I sat back one time and realized how many songs I've got about death or crows, or whatever. It's mostly that, and I realized, wow, I tried to do something else, and I just was blank. I couldn't do it.
Right.
And I thought, well, then fine. That's not me. You know what you're getting when you come to my show. Variety is not one of them, I guess. But yeah. So the lyrically, they're very similar. I think the next album or the next songs are getting kind of more hard edged, a little more. I think maybe, I don't know if eccentric is the word, but maybe a little more. You wouldn't listen to any of them, I think, and think, oh, that sounds Tom Waitsy or anything like that. Definitely more influenced by that, in that it's a little more off-kilter at times, I guess, than just a consistent groove.
Do you get a chance to get out and hear other people play?
A little bit, not as much as I'd like to. We always find ourselves so busy that we don't get to do it as much as we'd like to. But there are a few that if I know are playing close, I have to go out and see and support. I do. I'm a big McMurtry fan, so I like to go see him. And when Ray is local, if he's in the area that we are, I'll definitely go see Ray. In Austin, there's this band that I like a lot called Cowboy and Indian. They're really cool. I don't even know how to describe them. They do some songs. It's definitely different from what I do. It's kind of more indie, I guess. They'll post these raw videos on YouTube, and I'm not a music elitist or anything like that, but I don't like a lot of stuff.
Sure.
And there's very rarely someone that I'll watch that just absolutely floors me as far as, the harmonies or the song itself or whatever, And I'll watch their videos, and they consistently kind of make my mouth open a little bit,
Wow, cool.
Kind of a jaw drop type of a deal, and I'm a big fan of theirs. I don't get to see them very often, but they are local here, and they tour, I think, nationally. But they're great. Cowboy and Indian, check them out.
What has Austin brought to your music?
Well, the woodshedding took place in Austin, so just being around the environment when I was going through that period was great. I love it down here. I moved down here about 4 or 5 years ago, and it's such a community, as far as, especially with the musicians. It's a bigger town, but it still has that very, very small town feel. So you see the same people, every day, just about, if you frequent the same places. We're kind of the hippie kids. We do the whole, local places and the whole foods and stuff like that, and you see the same people every day, which is cool. You're the musicians that and love, you see any random day just walking down the street, and including, places, people that would sell out, 10,000 people in Dallas, you'll just see walking down the street, here, you'll see Robert playing at your local little guitar shop, and it's been really neat to be around and rub elbows with what I consider to be, true musicians. It's just it's, if anything, I guess, living here has just helped to cultivate that idea of maybe I can be a musician,
right?
Right, kind of a thing. It helps you realize, there is a community. They're here to help for the most part, and it is possible to make a career of music if you play your cards right.
Austin is kind of known for these residencies. Is that something that you have done or have down the pike?
I did a Saxon pub residency when I was going through my big cocooning process, which was great. Saxon Pub is a cool place to play. It's one of those places. It's on Lamar, South Lamar. It's not in the touristy area. It's where all the cool kids hang out, and it's a great little listening venue, bar thing. As far as residencies in Austin, that's about I did a Green Hall residency, which isn't in Austin, in the same scene and in the same within 40 minutes of here. But residencies are a big thing here. I haven't done that many of them.
Did any of those turn out to be pretty cool?
Yeah, a lot of them did. The most fun, I think, was the ones I did with some of the Band of Heathens. I did some, I kind of broke them up, so I did one each.
Cool.
Yeah, so it was the one I did with Gordy Quist, a guy named Clayton Colvin. That was a fun gig. That was an interesting gig because it was in the middle. I guess it was maybe last year. It was during where it got like down to into the 20s here.
Oh, wow.
And there was like snow flurries, and they only have these old wood burning stoves to warm the place at Green. So there's no AC. They just open these giant, the walls kind of pop up, and there's screens in the summer, and in the winter they just have like 3 wood burning stoves, and that's it in the whole place. We had our gloves on, we had our our coats completely on, and you could literally see our breath as we're singing, and even though we're inside, but still the place was, we were in like the little front room in that one because it was just too cold to be in the other room because there's no wood burning stove.
Because gloves always make for excellent finger-picking guitar playing.
Oh, yeah. Well, fortunately, we had the fingerless gloves.
You'd have to.
It didn't make it any better. It was actually fun, though. It was one of those things where, the terrible circumstances actually make for better memories.
Right.
Kind of a thing, And so that was fun. The other one that I did with Colin, with the other Heathen, was a great show. That was a blast. Those are some of the more noteworthy ones. I had actually had one with Ed, but I got like the flu or something at that time. So he did it, but with some other people. Those Heathen ones were probably the best, though, because I love their stuff and love those guys great.
I really appreciate your time, Lincoln. Thanks so much for being with us on Country Fried Rock.
Well, thank you guys so much, and I really appreciate all the support that you guys give. I mean, you guys are the ones that get our music out to people that we wouldn't, readily be able to reach. And so you guys' work is much appreciated.
Thanks a ton. Have a great weekend.
Thank you, you too.
All right, bye-bye. Country Fried Rock. Find the full playlist from this episode on countryfriedrock.org. Check us out on iTunes. No music, just talk. Our theme music is from The Full Tones. Our Country Fried Rock stinger is from Steve Soto and the Twisted Hearts. Country Fried Rock. Copyright 2012 by Lilypad Productions. All rights reserved.
Ever he been helping us some Country Fried Rock?
Hey y'all, it's Sloane Spencer. Thanks so much for finding all these new old episodes of Country Fried Rock. I've got something completely different available these days called Sleep with Rock Stars. And it all started from a listener comment back in the very early days of Country Fried Rock who said, I slow these down to 75% and fall asleep to them. And I was like, well, over the years I started thinking about it, and I recently started Sleep with Rock Stars. It's the Gen X Sleep Podcast, and you can find it at sleepwithrockstars.com or your favorite podcast app.